have a good 4th of July?
Yes.
It was hot. But you know, Ronald Reagan famously said, for Republicans, every day is the 4th of July.
Amen.
For Democrats, every day is April 15th. We're living in remarkable times. Anything is possible. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I found myself playing one-on-one basketball with Jimmy Kimmel. And I gotta say, that's something nobody thought would ever come to pass. I'll tell you the backstory of how that happened, because that was a little bit of an odd thing to be occurring. The backstory is I'm a die-hard Houston Rockets. I've been a Rockets fan my whole life. And our Rockets, tragically, we lost in Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. Chris Paul hadn't gotten injured, by the way. I think we won the whole thing. But the next night, Jimmy Kimmel went on TV and began making fun of us. And he began saying the reason the Rockets lost is because Ted was at the game. And that Cruz cursed the Rockets. So I saw that, and I got kind of ticked off. And I figured, well, look, I can get mad, or I can have fun with it. So I pulled out my phone and I sent a tweet. I said, all right, big guy, you talk a good game. Let's settle this man-to-man, one-on-one hoops. The loser gives $5,000 to the charity of the winner's choice. Well, Jimmy and I went back and forth at each other on Twitter, but the long and short of it is he accepted. So he got on a plane, he flew down to Houston. We went to TSU, Texas Southern University, and 6,000 people came out to watch the game. As I observed that day, never have so many people gathered to watch such little talent in basketball. Now that whole week, before the game, Jimmy had gone on TV every single night talking smack. He'd open his monologue with talking smack, guaranteeing victory. He guaranteed he was going to wipe the floor with Cruz. There was no way he could lose. Now the game itself wasn't pretty. I think there were probably 1,000 fouls between the two of us in the course of one game. But at the end of the day, the score was Cruz 11, Kimmel 9. And the very best part of it was seeing Jimmy go with his tail between his legs back to the plane to fly back to California, and knowing that for the next 50 years, Hollywood liberals are going to give him grief. Jimmy, how could you lose to Ted Cruz? It was truly the gift that keeps on giving. And you know what? Not only that, we raised over $80,000 for two wonderful Houston charities. These are truly remarkable times. You know, if you look nationally, if you look at where our country is nationally, as we started last year, 2017, with a Republican president, Republican majorities in both houses of Congress, we faced an incredible opportunity. I think there were 4 big domestic priorities for the new president and the new Congress. Tax cuts, regulatory reform, Obamacare, and judges. My view was if we could deliver on all 4 of those, it would have a long-lasting and powerful benefit for the people of Texas and people across this country. And if we couldn't deliver on any of them, it would be one of the biggest missed opportunities of our lifetimes. Well, as we stand here a year and a half into it, it is remarkable just how many of those priorities we've been able to deliver on.
That's right.
In December, we passed an historic tax cut, the biggest tax cut in a generation. Cutting taxes on small businesses, on farmers, on ranchers, on job creators, cutting families, cutting taxes on hard-working families all across Texas. Doubling the child tax credit from $1,000 per child per year to $2,000 per child per year, which is putting real money in the pockets of hard-working families. If your daughter needs braces this summer, if your son wants to go to summer camp, if you want to save up to take your family to Disney World for a family vacation, or maybe you just need some extra money to pay the rent or pay the car note, real money in the pockets of hardworking Texans. Not only that, we doubled the standard deduction, which means starting next year, 90% of Americans will fill out your taxes on a postcard. Now, personally, I think that should be 100%, and we should adopt a simple flat tax and abolish the IRS. But 90% is a very good start. On regulatory reform, we've seen enormous victories on regulatory reform as just about every cabinet agency, just about every cabinet secretary has pulled back job-killing regulations, regulations that were hammering Texas, that were hammering the oil and gas industry. And the effect we're seeing, we have right now the lowest unemployment in decades.
Yes.
We have the lowest African American unemployment ever recorded. We have the lowest Hispanic unemployment ever recorded. And we have right now, there are more job vacancies nationwide than there are people actively seeking employment. Texas is booming. With low taxes, limited regulations, Texas small businesses are thriving. And what I hear from small business owners all over the state is a renewed sense of enthusiasm, of excitement, of optimism. They're investing new capital. They're opening new facilities. They're hiring new workers. Wages are going up, which means for all the young people here, 4 or 5 years ago, young people coming out of school, you had student loans up to your eyeballs. You were scared, am I going to get a job? Now you've got young people coming out in the workforce where wages are rising and there are opportunities for 2, 3, 4 jobs. Third big priority, Obamacare. Clearly the biggest unfinished commitment of the Republican majority. But even that, it is worth noting, we did manage to come together and repeal the Obamacare individual mandate. That's a big deal. I led the fight to get that done, and I'll tell you, last fall, nobody in Washington thought we could get it done. We had maybe a half dozen senators supporting it, but we made the case publicly that it was an unfair tax, that it hammered the most vulnerable among us, and we went from a half dozen senators to, in December, all 52 Republicans standing together, uniting as one, and repealing the Obamacare individual mandate. Now we need to finish the job and repeal the rest of that disastrous law to lower premiums and make health insurance accessible to everyone. And the fourth big priority, judges. I think judges have been an unmitigated success of President Trump and the Republican majority in the Senate. We have Neil Gorsuch on the U.S. Supreme Court. We have strong constitutionalists on the federal courts up and down. You know, last year the Senate confirmed more federal appellate judges than any time in history in the first year of a president's term. And last week, with the retirement of Justice Anthony Kennedy, we have now the opportunity for what could prove to be the single most consequential decision of the entire Trump presidency.
Right.
Now, last week when that happened, my opponent, Democratic Congressman Beto O'Rourke, he tweeted out, the Kennedy vacancy only ups the stakes in the U.S. Senate race in Texas. You know what? I retweeted it. That's exactly right, it does. And let me tell you, Texans, if you care about the Constitution, if you care about the Bill of Rights, if you want justices that will be faithful to the law, that will protect our fundamental liberties, that will protect free speech, that will protect religious liberty, that will protect the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, that will protect the 10th Amendment, and all the liberties we have as Texans, then we need strong principled constitutionalists on the court, and not that. That's what this election is all about, and I am proud to be with you. With that, happy to answer any questions.
I have a question.
Yes, sir, in the
I have
back.
a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I heard from the NRA group that there was a movement to attach this E-Verify bill to the immigration bill that they were going to try and rush through here just recently. Do you know anything about that? And if so, is the Senate going to vote it down?
So, in terms of the immigration bill, the House just voted on multiple versions of immigration bills. They all got voted down. Every one of them got voted down. Several months ago in the Senate, we had multiple versions of immigration bills. They all got voted down. And I think what we're facing right now on immigration and most other issues is such a massive partisan divide that anything the Republicans have supported, the Democrats are filibustering. And I don't see that as likely to change unless and until we have an election where the American people make another decisive decision about what direction.
I have
Yes,
a question.
Sure.
You may not have an answer for it, but I just want you to think about it. The Rosenstein, when he was getting grilled,
Yeah.
he mentioned that the Justice Department has 115,000 employees.
Yep.
The FBI only has 35. The CIA has 21 or 2. Border Patrol's gotten up to 20 now, at least. But I just wondered, the question burning in my mind is, why does it take so many more lawyers and paralegals and office clerks to achieve justice than it does gun toters?
Look, it's a very good question, although I'll say those Department of Justice numbers include a lot of things. So, for example, the FBI is all included in those DOJ totals. There are a lot of different component agencies that report up to the Attorney General.
Okay.
And so it's not just all lawyers. It is law enforcement agents that are carrying firearms and badges. It's also prosecutors that are prosecuting bad guys. I mean, it runs the gamut. So DOJ has a whole bunch of different component agencies that report up to it.
Okay.
What are they going to do about the border wall from Mexico to the United States?
Great question. Look, the question was, what are we going to do about the border wall? In my view, we need to build that wall. You know, I spend a lot of time down at the border. And every time I'm down at the border, I try to sit down with Border Patrol agents. I try to sit down with local sheriffs, with law enforcement, and ask them, how's it going, what's effective, what's not. And just listen. That's something that not enough elected officials do, is just listen to their constituents and hear what the folks on the ground say. What they consistently say. So I ask every time, I say, look, is a wall helpful? There's obviously a lot of debate about do we need a wall or not. Without exception, they universally say, yes, a wall would be helpful. It's not everything. It's not a panacea, but it would be helpful. And, you know, the old line, if you build a 15-foot wall, someone will bring a 16-foot ladder. They said that's actually true. So where they built walls, and we've got a lot of miles of walls already built. He said where they built walls, they see people crossing the river and bringing ladders. But one of the critical pieces to stopping illegal immigration is the time between detection and apprehension. What they say is it takes a lot longer to run with a ladder. And then you set up the ladder and you're climbing and it slows you down and it gives time for when they detect someone crossing to get the Border Patrol agents there and apprehend them before they can disappear into a population where you can't find them. But a wall is not the only thing we need. We need walls, we need fences, we need technology, we need fixed wing and rotary wing aircraft, we need infrared. And the most important piece I believe we need is boots on the ground. We need to triple the U.S. Border Patrol. And I got to say, there is no issue on which there is a sharper divide in this U.S. Senate race than immigration. And there is no race in the country on which the two candidates have a sharper divide than the U.S. Senate race in Texas.
All right.
So, on my side, a couple of months ago, I was proud to be endorsed by the National Border Patrol Council. That is the union of the Border Patrol agents all across the country that keep our country safe. And that's a union. They usually stay out of politics. They don't make very many endorsements. And we had the union presidents from every sector along the Rio Grande. They all flew to McAllen to endorse me together, because they said out of 100 senators, the leading senator fighting to secure the border, to build the wall, to stand with the men and women of Border Patrol is Ted Cruz. The contrast on the other side, my opponent, Congressman Beto O'Rourke, supports sanctuary cities, supports cities defying federal immigration law and releasing violent criminals without informing federal immigration officials. He supports open borders. Not only does he oppose a wall, he says we have too many fences and walls on the border already, we need to tear those fences and walls down. And just this weekend, he publicly came out and said he is, quote, open to abolishing ICE.
Forget him.
Now, ICE is the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. And let me tell you, look, there are all sorts of discussions we can have that are reasonable policy disagreements on an issue. Abolishing ICE is not one of them. Abolishing ICE is a radical proposition. I'll tell you, I stand unapologetically with the brave men and women of law enforcement, of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, who go in and keep us safe. These are the law enforcement agents that go in and arrest gangs, they go in and arrest MS-13, they go in and arrest violent criminal illegal aliens and keep us safe. And I'll tell you, just yesterday, Congressman O'Rourke doubled down on that position. He said, instead of just abolishing ICE, he said, maybe we should abolish the entire Department of Homeland Security. Look, I gotta say, that's just nuts. And it's an unfortunate sign. I suspect all of us are saddened at how divided we are as a country. At the anger, at the rage. And one of the reactions, look, folks on the far left, the reaction they had to Donald Trump's election, they're out of their mind with rage. You know, where this is coming from, where this whole abolish ICE thing is coming from. You remember a few weeks ago, a young woman won a Democratic primary in New York. An open socialist, was a Bernie Sanders activist, defeated a longtime Democratic incumbent in the Democratic primary. And she campaigned on full-out socialism. She campaigned promising to abolish ICE. I mean, that used to be, a month ago, if I came here and said, let me tell you something, Congressman O'Rourke wants to abolish ICE, the media would have mocked me. PolitiFact would have said, pants on fire, that's crazy, that's a fringe position.
Right.
Well, when this candidate won in New York embracing abolishing ICE, then Senator Kirsten Gillibrand came out and said, let's abolish ICE, and suddenly Congressman O'Rourke and Democrats all over the country are saying, it used to be Democrats would at least claim that they want to enforce our immigration laws.
Right.
They're not claiming that anymore. They're saying, in Congressman O'Rourke's words, they're open to abolishing the agency charged with enforcing the immigration laws. That doesn't reflect the views of the overwhelming majority of Texans. Yes, ma'am.
What about the possibility of, I've heard this on Facebook a little bit, of having a place where individuals can contribute to paying for the wall? I think Americans would pay for the wall if you'd let us.
Yes.
Yeah. I got to say, I think it's a very good idea. It's an idea we've done now. This is the 11th town hall we've done this week. And I'd say that idea has been suggested in probably a third of them. I mean, it's something that a lot of Texans are suggesting. I would certainly be supportive of that. I can tell you, in terms of building a wall, it's interesting. One of the main arguments, apparently they're coming to get us. One of the main arguments that Democrats use against building a wall is they say it's too expensive. Now, it may be the first time in recorded history Democrats have ever thought any government spending was too expensive. But set that aside. So last year, I introduced legislation. It was called the El Chapo Act. And it says, let's take the money criminally forfeited from El Chapo and from other drug lords, the billions they've made crossing the border illegally, and let's use that money to build the wall. Now, that would cost the taxpayers zero, because we'd be using the drug lords' money. We haven't voted on it yet, but I'm urging our leadership, bring it up for a vote, and we can give Democrats an opportunity to see. They're complaining about the cost. The cost of that is zero. And I'm going to predict you'll see Democrats all vote against it. Because Democrats, the national Democrats, they've gotten more radical, they've gotten more extreme on illegal immigration. They've decided, I believe, that they think politically it's beneficial for them. You know, there's a new politically correct term for illegal alien. It's called undocumented Democrat. Yes, ma'am.
You did mention that this is a town hall, but it's your 11th town hall. And you have had Democrats vote for you in the past.
Absolutely.
So do you feel bad now that you might be alienating some of us that are moderate voters and Democrat voters, if you're assuming everyone? If this is a town hall, we're all your constituents, and I feel like I've heard about 10 anti-Democrats, and they are your voters also.
Ma'am, unquestionably, and my job is to represent all 28 million Texans, to represent Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Libertarians, and Texans across the board. When I'm talking about Washington Democrats, that's very different from Texas Democrats. Look, there's a long tradition of Texas Democrats who are moderates, who are common sense, who believe in low taxes, who want our constitutional rights protected. That is very, very different. The National Democratic Party in Washington has gotten extreme in a way that I find very troubling. That the lesson that Washington Democrats took from 2016 is that Hillary Clinton was too moderate, and they needed to go more Bernie Sanders, more Elizabeth Warren. Now, let me be clear. What I'm saying about these, none of this is personal. Where I'm disagreeing with them is on substance and policy. I think it is bad policy. I think it is wrong to support unlimited illegal immigration. I think it is bad policy and wrong to support sanctuary cities. I mean, these are real and meaningful policy differences. And in my experience, the vast majority of Texans agree with common sense principles of low taxes, low regulations, more jobs, and protecting our rights. And I'll make clear, even if someone doesn't. Look, for someone in Texas that may be on the far left and may enthusiastically embrace Bernie Sanders socialism, that's fine. That's the beauty of the First Amendment. We all have a right to have positions. It's my job to represent everyone, but it's not possible on any issue to have all 28 million Texans agree. That I don't think there's an issue under the sun that every Texan can agree on.
Oklahoma sucks.
Yeah, that comes close. That comes very close. And so let me tell you how I try to approach that, man. Is that number one, I try to fight for every Texan to have better jobs and higher wages and a better economic environment, for every Texan to have constitutional rights that are protected. And secondly, you know, what I've heard from a great many Democrats across the state is they come up to me over the last 6 years, they'll say something like the following. They'll say, you know what, I'm a Democrat, I didn't vote for it, but I'll say this, you're doing what you said you would do. And I think my responsibility as an elected official, as a candidate, is to come before you and tell you what I'm going to fight to do. My top two priorities are jobs and defending the Constitution, freedom of the Constitution. And if you know where I am, each of you can make a decision. If you agree with those priorities, then I would welcome your vote from whatever party you might be. And if you disagree with those priorities, that's why we got a political process to debate these outcomes and reach the right resolution.
So maybe not Democrats versus Republicans. All Democrats aren't alike and all Republicans aren't alike.
Unquestionably so. And unquestionably so. And look, I mean, for example, I told the Reagan joke. The Reagan joke, a lot of that is tongue-in-cheek. The April 15th. I mean, that's, you know, I will say there are too many people in politics that approach things in a mean-spirited way. That you see people.
Maxine Waters.
You see people yelling and cursing. You see people encouraging, harass, and attack people. I try to respond with a smile. When I talk to young people, I say, look, don't be angry. Don't, be a happy warrior. Now, you can have fun. You can make jokes. When I was in college, I led the Conservative Party in the debating society. One of my closest friends led the Liberal Party. The two of us, we'd debate like crazy. I'd call him a communist, he'd call me a fascist, and we'd go get a beer. I mean, there is a virtue of just not taking yourself that seriously. All of us. I mean, and I'm speaking collectively to everyone when I say that. And I'll give you an example of that. Back 2013, I think it was. I was newly elected to the Senate. I remember I was doing a Sunday show. And one of the Sunday show hosts said to me, "You've said Barack Obama is public enemy number one." And I actually stopped him. I stopped him right there. I said, hold on a second. I've never said any such thing. Those words have never come out of my mouth. And not only have I never said that, I don't believe it. I said, listen, let me be very clear. I think Barack Obama is absolutely sincere. Now, I think he believes in socialism. He believes in government control of the economy. But I think he believes it from good intentions. I think he sleeps well at night. He believes he is advancing social welfare and helping the American people. I think he believes all that. Now, I happen to think the ideas that he's advancing are profoundly harmful. And so I'm more than happy to talk about the substance of what actually works, but I'm not going to engage, and that's how I've always tried to approach politics, is to stay out of the mudslinging and nastiness and focus instead on what actually works to increase jobs, to expand opportunity, to make sure that every one of us, we want the next generation to have a brighter future than we did. And so from my end, that's what I'm going to try to focus on.
And I agree with you, Senator Cruz. I think there's far too much divisiveness in our politics these days. And I also think that when you have a presidential debate and a candidate calls another candidate's wife ugly and alleges that this candidate's father helped kill JFK, I tell you what, I would have popped that Yankee son of a bitch right in the mouth. I don't know why you didn't. And I also don't know why you don't continue or at least make some effort to tame down this president's rhetoric when it comes to being against the press, which, come on, I mean, that's the First Amendment right there. And I think he's maybe not attacking the First Amendment, but it's certainly a change of tone that should be concerning for all of us in this room, no matter which political stripes we wear.
He is our president.
He is our president, and he was elected, but you know.
And look, let me say,
no one said anything about that.
Hold on a second. Well, we're going to treat him. He's speaking respectfully. We need to treat him with respect. But let me say this, sir. I appreciate your comments. I understand where they're coming from. There are things that I can control, and there are things that I can't control. Listen, Donald Trump was not my first choice to be president.
Well, probably you were, I guess.
We had an election. The American people elected him. And I'll tell you the approach that I have in Washington. I walk down the halls of the Capitol. You have reporters descend on you. Inevitably, they're asking questions about whatever the latest outrage of the day is. And I tell them all, I say, you know what, I got a rule of thumb. I don't comment on tweets. I won't comment on the random comment of the day.
Okay.
If you want to talk substance, if you want to talk policy, I'll talk tax reform, I'll talk reg reform, I'll talk Obamacare, I'll talk judges, I'll talk national security, I'll talk foreign policy. But I'm not going to defend the indefensible. Let me be clear. There's things the president says that I would never say. But I can't control what he says. I have no ability to control it. But what I tell reporters is, listen, there are plenty of folks lighting their hair on fire on cable TV. I don't need to join them and become one of them. And so my approach is to ignore the political circus that is Washington and focus on substance. I'm going to tell you what I hear from Texans, the overwhelming majority of the Texans, is that's the approach I'm hearing the Texans want me to take. It is don't worry about all the nastiness and silliness and idiocy of each day up and down and who's attacking whom and who said what. Focus on lowering taxes, lowering regulations, jobs, jobs, jobs. Focus on defending our constitutional rights. Yes, sir.
Can you fill in the facts on this immigration, separating family thing and all this that's going on, please?
Yeah. No, very good question. Obviously, an issue a lot of folks are concerned about. Let me break it into two parts. Let me talk about first kids generally, and then secondly, let's talk about families and separating families. Let's start with kids. 2 weeks ago, I was down in Brownsville, visited 2 different detention facilities that are filled with kids. And it's heartbreaking. We shouldn't see any kids in facilities like this. But 2 weeks ago wasn't the first time that I've been to detention facilities with kids in them. I've been over and over again. I've been in 2013, I've been in 2014. And the vast majority of the kids who are coming over illegally, who are being detained, are unaccompanied minors. That means they're not coming with parents, not with a mom or dad or adult. It's a solo kid or a couple of kids that are being brought in by drug traffickers and cartels. And let me give you some stats that the media almost never tells you. You go back and look to 2010, 2011. There were roughly 6,000 unaccompanied children came into this country. Now that's 6,000 too many. In 2012, in June of 2012, President Obama signed DACA, his executive amnesty that was targeted at kids. The predictable effect of granting amnesty targeted at kids is the number of unaccompanied children coming into this country skyrocketed. It went from 6,000 a year to, in 2014, over 90,000 a year. So I was down at Lackland Air Force Base, which President Obama transformed into a housing facility for unaccompanied kids because of the volume that was coming. And by the way, all the Democrats that are now going down to detention facilities and bringing reporters with them, where were they in 2013 and 2014? When we had 90,000 children coming in, when Obama was in the White House, they didn't seem concerned about it at all. The media didn't seem all that concerned about it either. And it's important to understand, the people who are bringing these kids in, they're not well-meaning social workers with Birkenstocks and beards and hugging trees. They are vicious transnational criminal cartels. And these little boys and little girls are being physically abused or being sexually abused. Let me tell you a story I heard in Lackland Air Force Base, I think it was in 2014. An Obama HHS official told me that some of the cartels, the parents would pay the cartels to smuggle their kids into the U.S. And the reason they would come, the kids would tell them, is because they knew when they get here, they'd get a permiso. They'd get amnesty. They'd be allowed to stay. So the parents were willing to risk this horrific journey for their kids on hope of that permiso at the end. Well, midway through the journey, in a number of instances, the cartels were putting guns to the heads of children and forcing one child to cut off the fingers or the ears of another child. And then they would mail those body parts back to the parents, and they'd say, "Give us more money, or you will never see your child alive again." I mean, these are vicious criminals. And so the Obama HHS was dealing with some kids that were coming in with mutilations like this, other kids that were emotionally and psychologically traumatized. I mean, they had to do this at gunpoint or be killed. I believe nobody who cares about humanity or compassion should want to see little boys and little girls in the custody of human smugglers. And so any policy that is encouraging illegal immigration, I think, is the very opposite of compassion. Now let's talk in particular about family separations. That's obviously been a major topic of discussion recently. A significant percentage of those kids in custody came as part of a family unit. They either came with their mom or dad or another adult family relative. In my view, we should all be able to come together on the proposition that families should stay together. That the right place for a child is with their mom or dad. Now, there are 2 different approaches to do this. A number of congressional Democrats have gotten behind legislation that would effectively mandate that we release all the adults. And they say, look, that keeps the families together. If you release the adults and kids, everyone stays free, everyone gets to stay. I think that's exactly the wrong approach. That is the old policy of catch and release, where you catch someone, you give them a court date in the future, they don't show up for it, and it only encourages more and more illegal immigration. Going back to catch and release means we know for a certainty thousands upon thousands of children will continue to be abused by these human smugglers. So instead, what I've done, I introduced legislation 2 weeks ago that mandates, let's keep families together. Let's keep children with their parents. But don't do it by releasing everyone and ignoring our immigration laws. Let's keep them together in a secure family shelter. Let's double the number of federal immigration judges. And then let's process their claims quickly. So that if they have a valid claim for asylum under existing law, process it quickly, have it heard by a federal immigration judge and grant it. And if they don't have a valid claim, deny it from a federal immigration judge and put them on a plane and send them back. But enforce the law and keep families together. I think that's the right solution to that problem. All right, let me make a final point just to close because we've been here a while. Thank you for coming. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being part of this discussion. This election is a crossroads for our country. I'll tell you, the biggest challenge as Republicans we have in 2018 is complacency. Republicans in Texas say, oh, come on, it's a general election. Far too many people say, how can we possibly lose? That's a very, very dangerous attitude to have, particularly because the far left right now is angry. They're energized and they hate the president. That is a powerful motivator. It's a dangerous motivator. We underestimate that motivator at our peril. In November, we are going to see historic Democratic turnout. Now, here's the good news. There are a whole lot more conservatives than there are liberals in Texas. I don't believe the danger is a bunch of Texas conservatives waking up and suddenly voting Democratic. I don't think that's likely to happen in 2018. But what might happen is far too many of us stay at home. Folks who are unhappy, you're demoralized about one thing, you don't like another thing, you decide to stay home, and that's how we lose the state. That's how the whole direction we're going changes. And if I could talk for a moment just in closing about my race in particular. Typically a Democrat in Texas, when you're running in a general election, you at least pretend to go to the middle. You at least pretend to be moderate. That's been the usual pattern in Texas elections. My opponent in this race, Congressman Beto O'Rourke, has chosen a different path. He is running hard left. He's running like Bernie Sanders. So, he is promising to raise your taxes and repeal the tax cuts. He's promising to reinstate the job-killing regulations that hammered Texas farmers and ranchers and oil and gas and small businesses across the state. On Obamacare, he's promising to expand it to full-on socialized medicine, with the government in charge of your health care. On the Second Amendment, he tweeted out to the world how proud he is that he has an F rating from the NRA. Not a D minus, not a D, an F. I promptly retweeted it. Look, I think elections are about choices. If you want a big government, gun-grabbing liberal, well, the Democrats are giving you that choice. On immigration, we've already talked about how he's campaigning, saying he's open to abolishing Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. And he's supporting sanctuary cities. I'll tell you, on Israel, he has the most anti-Israel record of any Senate candidate in the country. When Hamas was raining rockets down on Israel, Congressman O'Rourke was one of 8 members of the House, 8 members out of 435, to vote against funding Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system. And he became the first Democratic Senate candidate in the country to come out explicitly for impeaching Donald Trump and to say categorically he would vote yes to impeach Donald Trump. Despite the fact that he is running hard left, he is the #1 Democratic fundraiser in the country. Last quarter, I raised $3.2 million. That's the most of any Republican Senate candidate. We're working hard. We've got a lot of support. He raised $6.7 million. He's outraising us 2-1. Now, the reason is, as I said, the hard left is angry. When he came out for impeaching Donald Trump, I guarantee you within 72 hours he raised millions of dollars as liberals all over the country said, yeah, that's what we want to do. So for everyone here who cares about low taxes, who cares about low regulations, who wants to see more jobs and higher wages and more opportunity. Everyone here who cares about defending the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. I want to ask you, number one, make sure you come out and vote in November. Number two, bring your friends, bring your family, bring your neighbors, even if they're disgruntled about something. Bring them to come out and vote. Number three, I want to encourage y'all to sign up to volunteer. We have an app you can download on your phone. You can make phone calls. You can knock on doors. This election will be decided by turnout. And number four, I would ask every one of you to go home and go online to tedcruz.org, and make a contribution. We're getting outraised 2-1, and those resources, what they're going to go to do is connect with, communicate with, and mobilize conservatives and common sense Texans to come out and defend our freedom and our Constitution. There are 50 states in this union, but there is only one Texas. And I'm honored to stand with each and every one of you. Thank you. God bless you.